Type, okay.
Don't type.
Live from the M365 Show. Fortunato Di Donato, Marcel Brusk, Isabel Liu, and our special guest, Laura Rogers. Let's settle this once and for all. Microsoft Forms, quick and clean, surveys, quizzes, you know what I mean. SharePoint forms, list powered gear, business processes running clear. Power Apps, the heavyweight fight, custom logic, better ignite. But with great power comes complexity. Which one's best for your strategy? Battle of the forms, who will take the crown? Building smarter workflows, time to break it down. Forms, Power Apps, SharePoint on the floor. Pick the right tool and unlock the door. Streamline data, automate flow, modern solutions, let the knowledge grow. Laura Rogers drops the pro advice, tips and tricks to make it precise. Logic, automation, governance too, user experience made just for you. No matter your role, it or biz, the right form tool defines what it is. Fast and simple, Microsoft Forms. List-driven power, SharePoint Forms. Ultimate flexibility, Power Apps. But which one wins is up to you. Battle of the forms, let the showdown start. Build with confidence, build it smart. The M365 Show is living the zone. With Fortunato, Marcel, Isabel, and Laura on the throne. Battle of the Forms begins now.
Awesome, to say the least.
was amazing.
But I will change the sunglasses because it was a bit too cool. But now, look back, please. Awesome, wonderful. Hello, everyone. Nice to see you again somewhere out there. Welcome to our wonderful new episode of the M365 Show. I'm the one with the strange name, Fortunato, or Fortu, joined by my wonderful co-hosts, Isabel and Marcel. Today we are diving into one of the most debated topics in Microsoft 365 land. Which digital form solution should you use?
That's right. So whether you're automating workflows, gathering data, or building custom experiences, chances are you're asking yourself, which form should I use? Should I use Microsoft Forms, Power Apps, or SharePoint Forms?
Yeah, and who could better guide us today as our guest, SharePoint guru, Wonder Laura, Laura Rogers. Welcome to our show.
Hello,
Laura.
thanks, welcome. That music was amazing. It's good to be here.
The 80s. Never die.
Well, Laura, tell us briefly about your journey helping organizations transform business processes with digital forms.
Well, I have been in love with business processes and forms ever since. I've been using SharePoint for 20 years, since SharePoint 2003, and then so it used to be back in the 2007 days. It was InfoPath, SharePoint Designer, and then of course the technologies have evolved over the years. Now it's Power Apps, Power Automate, and then SharePoint Forms are getting to be amazing. And there's Microsoft Forms, so there have always been kind of a lot of different ways to do the same thing. But my favorite thing to do in these products is to automate business processes. So I always get a lot of questions about, how do I know where to start? Or if I start with one product, can I just switch to the other later? But it's really, there's a lot of requirements gathering and a lot of like decision making right at the beginning, things that it's good to know. So that's what this is about.
Well, that's fantastic. So I guess we can get started with the light contender, Microsoft Forms. Laura, what makes Forms such a popular entry-level choice? Let us know why Microsoft Forms is is that best option?
Microsoft Forms is very easy for just end users, business users. Your mom could create a Microsoft form. It's just very, very intuitive and very.
Challenge accepted.
Yeah. So, yes, the logic is very simple. You just kind of, the fields just go straight down the page, and you can do branching logic. So that's where you get kind of a little bit more advanced with those, but they're one way, which is was a kind of a negative because you can't edit an existing Microsoft form. But the best thing about them is that they're extremely simple to create and that they can be anonymous. So the fact that they can be anonymous is a big plus with a lot of requirements that you might have regarding outside users being able to fill out a form. So yeah, you take that data and pull it in and go to and have it. You don't have to, but you could just have people fill out forms and it automatically kind of goes into a spreadsheet. But you could take that data and use Power Automate to put it in a list or a database, or take the attachments that were added and put them in the SharePoint document library and do further business process automations with that data. But just getting started with building forms in Microsoft Forms is easy. And there's Copilot in there. If you have a Microsoft 365 Copilot license, you could just start by describing what you want your form to do. And then it takes, saves you some time, builds it for you.
So so if I think about a Microsoft Forms, I think, is it the right name? So because I think, so if you heard about, for example, Power Apps, Canvas apps, or other formula solution like SharePoint Forms, so Microsoft Forms, it's heard like a tool that I create formulas too. But do you think Microsoft Survey or Poll would be a better name for it? And what are the best scenarios here for Microsoft Forms?
Microsoft naming. Well, I think it's supposed to be, I think it was created as a competitor to Google Forms. So Google Forms is just called Google Forms, and Microsoft Forms it's kind of a one-to-one. They have a lot of similar features. So it makes sense that they called it Microsoft Forms, but that does make it confusing when there are SharePoint lists, which are also called Microsoft lists, and those have forms. And so it is kind of confusing because people that are new to Microsoft 365, they just immediately think Microsoft Forms is the only way to create forms, and they might not even know that the lists exist. So I'm not sure I have control over what Microsoft called it, but it is a pretty basic name, Microsoft. It says everything, but I guess you'd have to weigh like what simple forms or something that it does compared to other
Power Forms.
Power Forms, no Power.
We need
so
power.
I think so. Poll or Microsoft Survey, I think, would be a better name, because so I use it generally for so for surveys, for example, in Teams or outside from Teams. But so I think Forms is for me a little bit special as naming. But so I didn't know this story regarding to Google. It's new for me. Thank you.
Well, that's just my guess. So yeah, it's just what it seems like. Yeah.
Okay, great. When it comes to forms themselves, are there any major limitations when it comes to automation, validation, or logic wise?
Limitations in forms. The main limitation is that they're only ever one way. So you can only ever just have a new form and then it goes in, but you can never click an existing form to edit it or to look at it and do an approval or anything like that. So once that one-way form goes in, after that, it's just data. It's just fields and cells in a spreadsheet. It's just a row in a table. So that's where it gets a little clunky when you need to have like a business process, if you need to have end users fill out a form. And then if you have anything else that you ever need to happen with that form, Microsoft Forms is not ever going to be the interface. So that at that point, you would have to have it have a flow, take that form, like get triggered when the form gets created, and then you'd have to separately go create a SharePoint list and separately go create all those columns manually and then create a flow to put the data in the columns. But then the end users opening that form would have a completely different experience than the users filling it out initially. So a lot of times these are used for business processes that require somebody outside of your company, maybe going to your web page and filling, or a contractor or a customer filling something out and submitting it, and then having an internal business process, which is obviously a very separate process. Unfortunately, another limitation is that you can have attachments in Microsoft Forms, but you can't, if it's an anonymous form, you can't have attachments. So if you want to have attachments on your form, people have to be authenticating to your tenant, and they have to log in. And then if you create, if you just go to forms.microsoft.com and click new and start creating a form, then it's going to be an individual form, and that's going to be tied to you personally. And when people add attachments, they're going to go to your OneDrive. So the best practice, if you want to share that data, is to, when you first create the form, make it a group form. So on that main screen in Forms, you're going to have if you scroll down, you're going to see groups you're a member of, Microsoft 365 groups you're a member of. And you click on a group, and then you'll have a button that says new group form. So then when you have a group form, those attachments will go into that SharePoint site for that Microsoft 365 group. So that's another kind of good pro tip for best practices, is I would recommend you tell all your end users to always create group forms. So in case they ever leave the company, that form is not just tied to that individual.
Yeah, I actually did not know that. Does that mean only the team have access to that form, or can that be shared to everybody?
As far as filling it out, it can be shared to, you could have it be shared to everyone in your company. You can have it be shared to a specific person or group of people as far as filling it out. But then when you make it a group form, that means the management of the form and the management of the attachments is going to be for that whole group of people. So it's not really the same thing as who can fill it out and who can manage and design the form.
Oh, that's good to know.
Awesome. Any other topics on this segment? Otherwise, I would move on. I will be the guy that will look at the
Yeah,
time.
I think so. One interesting topic, I think it could be the usage of forms in Power Automate or in complex workflows. What do you think about that?
Well, it can be a trigger. So you could just have, when a form gets filled out, that's your trigger, and then you can have it. You can do anything with that data. It's just it's a row in a table. So it can be sent to a SharePoint list. You can send it to Dataverse. You can create a row in a SQL table, and then you can have it send an email. Now, Microsoft Forms has some settings for automatically sending an email when the form gets filled out. But then in a flow, you could have it send a custom email to certain specific people. You could have it create a list item in SharePoint and then have it send an email to somebody letting them know they need to go approve something. So then it's completely up to you as to whatever your business process requirements are. And there are hundreds of connectors you could use in Flow to customize that.
Awesome. Good. Then we have to watch. Let's move on to SharePoint Forms, the classic option. I like it, the classic option. There are many organizations still rely heavily on them. Why, and what are the strengths here?
Well, when you say the word classic, it makes me think of like SharePoint on premises, like old classic lists. And that's not really what we're talking about. So classic means just like, I guess the word classic would be in like the old on-premises forms, but just a regular SharePoint list form. Like if you just went and clicked create and created a new list, and just the form that automatically comes with the list, the way that you customize those is a little advanced. It's a little clunky for a business user, like an end user type of person, because as soon as you get into the interface where you're customizing the way that forms look. There's a couple things you can do. You can rearrange the columns, of course, rearrange the way you want the fields to show on the form. You can also do a little bit of conditional formatting. You can really just hide and show something based on the value in another field. And then you can also do like little sections. So you have to use JSON though. And you can use JSON to customize the way the header and footer look, and you have to use this other little special syntax. It involves a lot of square brackets and commas to customize, to create all the sections that you would want to have, so that to segment out your form, just like any form that you see that might have details about the person at the top, and then details about what the request is in another section, etc. So that's pretty much all you can do, is create sections and some very basic conditional formatting with that just basic list form.
Sounds good. So when customizing a SharePoint form, when is it not a right move for that business process?
Well, the next type of form we're going to talk about, that's like the more modern form on the same SharePoint list, gives you the ability to not give people permission to the list. So that's one of the negatives with just the out-of-the-box list form, is a lot of business solutions, people don't want to let the end users go to the list or see the list or even know where the list is when they're filling out the form. They only want them to just submit their information. So that's one of the things about just using the out of the box functionality, is that by default, if you're filling out a form, you have to have access to the list. So then you could create views and to kind of filter and sort things, but technically all the end users would have access to all that data. So that's one of the biggest negatives to it in more formal business processes.
Gotcha. And do you think Power Apps is taking over what InfoPath and SharePoint Designer once did?
Yes, but also those new modern forms that are on lists are also kind of starting to take over that space, because they're putting more functionality, more logic just straight on the SharePoint list, that a lot of the times when you had to do something just fairly basic, like hide and show fields or do logic on what's shown in drop downs, or what's whether things are read only, or any kind of branching, you immediately had to go to Power Apps. So, but Power Apps has got an extreme learning curve. It's like, I call it kind of like jumping off the Power Apps cliff, because there are some basic things you can do. And then as soon as you start getting to logic, it's like, whoa. I mean, I'm not a programmer. I don't know code, but you still have to really dig in and understand the functions. It's kind of like writing Excel formulas, but it is a lot to learn, and it is a whole different way of doing it. So, but fortunately, it's like Microsoft is putting more of those things, more of like common business requirements for forms, in just the regular SharePoint forms.
Okay.
So if I think back at my starts with I would say SharePoint forms. So I started to build a really big IP solution based on SharePoint forms. After, I would say, in a half year, I said, okay, this was not a really good idea, because I must integrate so much other connectors and so on. And so that's what I understand. I think it's I say 7 years ago. Now I know how I work is better, but this is a main topic for me. So SharePoint list form differ to, I would say, an Canvas app or Canvas app integration. What do you think when you should and SharePoint form, and when you should and Power App, Canvas app?
Well, a lot of the time, a big reason and a common thing in forms is a repeating table, a sub list of items. SharePoint forms cannot do that at all. Like, you used to have the ability to do that with those old InfoPath form library forms, but there is not a way. So a lot of business processes require some kind of sub list. Like, think about it, filling out an expense report. You have all the information about your expense report, and then you have a sub list of all the detail, like all the individual expenses. So anything like that, you'd have to go to Power Apps for. And Power Apps it is a very free-form blank canvas where you can pretty much do anything. And SharePoint has a lot of restrictions. So some examples of things we do in Power Apps forms are conditionally hiding showing fields, conditionally setting fields to read only or editable, conditionally setting fields to required or not, and also just having an entire, with Power Apps, you have multiple screens. So you could have a special screen, say just for admins with special fields on it. You could have a special screen that has the list of requests. You can have so any kind of custom interface where you want it to look a very specific way and have things lined up in different places on the screen. Those are going to require a Power App. So you're going to discover pretty quickly as soon as you create a SharePoint list and try to edit the form. If you have business requirements like that, you're going to discover that pretty quickly that you can't just do that in the SharePoint form.
And I have a very special one. If you add more than 12 lookup or people picker fields, it's not possible to edit your Power App site anymore, I think. Because this was really crazy, but it is like it is. And yeah, this is another really special point, I think.
That is true. That is true. So you can't have any more than 12 lookups and people pickers in your SharePoint list. And then you can't use a Power App on it. So you'd have to, a couple of different options. You'd have to either build that whole solution with Dataverse as your table, which is a premium license, or you'd have to do something kind of time consuming and custom, and you'd have to go into that list and create those lookups and people fields as just text fields. And then in the Power App interface, you could make them be whatever kind of control you want, like a drop down or a people picker or radio buttons or whatever you want, but then just have everything right to just text fields in the SharePoint list. So that you're adding hours and hours to your project when you have to go to that level, though. Power Apps is very time consuming.
Yeah, that's why I didn't create lookup fields, I think, since 6 years ago. I think lookups was in the past.
Yeah, a lot of times if you have like something you're looking up to, you could just store the ID of that item in a field, like as a number, and then do it that way.
And if we are coming to Power Apps, it's really easy to create and look up in Power Apps, and it's better to working here with, for example, 2 fields on one or something like else, and it's better. Everything is better as to create lookups, lookup columns, I think. So if customers had trouble regarding to SharePoint, 5,000 items or the lookup columns was ever been a problem.
Right. When you have thousands of items and you're dealing with a Power App, then having thousands of items might be a better reason to go to Dataverse or SQL. And then in Power Apps, there are some special things that you can do when you're dealing, if you need to be able to render a huge list of items like that, is like put indexing, of course, on the columns, and have on the ones that people are going to be filtering and sorting by, and have the end user have an interface where the end user is clicking to narrow down. They're clicking a button of a category or something, and they're narrowing down that list before you try to render that whole list on the screen. Because users don't usually need an entire list of 5,000 items to scroll through. They're usually needing to find some subset of it anyway.
Wow, really good. So I think we move to our next segment. The Power Apps, we would say we heavyweight champion. And my question here is, so we started before with when we use forms, when is SharePoint forms a good way to work? So when could be Power Apps Canvas app a really good solution? And what is the differentiation to model driven? So I think this could be another good question here too.
Okay, so Canvas apps versus model driven. Frankly, I don't do much model driven apps projects, but model driven, I would liken that more to Dynamics CRM, and it still kind of has that interface that just traditional Dynamics has had. It doesn't have as much of the granular ability to customize what forms look like as Canvas apps do. And it is good for large like sales databases, similar to something like Salesforce, where you have pretty basic screens, but you maybe have a lot of tables that you need to navigate through and fill out pretty just basic forms. Yeah. So CRM is more of what that is likened to. And it's more expensive. So always keep that in mind when you're deciding between Canvas apps and model driven and Dataverse. So if you just use Power Apps with SharePoint as your data connection, you don't have to have any kind of extra Power Apps license. So I think that's pretty misleading. A lot of people kind of think that as soon as I use Power Apps, I have to have a Power Apps license, but it's that premium connector like SQL or Dataverse. That's where that higher license level comes in, and needing to have like a Power Apps premium license. And that's all the users that would be using that app would have to have that higher license.
Otto, you are back. So we didn't hear you.
I don't think it's mic. It's working.
Better?
Now we could hear you.
Nice. The great mic. I had to change my PC because the other one basically decided to do it's a long story. But I listened. So this was the funny part. It was pantomime. But anyway, coming back to the topic, what kind of businesses and departments should consider going beyond forms and SharePoint in general?
I would say it's going to be specific to the business requirements of that specific project. So that's what I like to tell people, is to find out as much as possible about what you're supposed to be building. Sometimes you'll have the business come to you and they'll just hand you a PDF file or hand you a piece of paper and say, this form needs to be electronic. And there are a lot of things that they haven't really thought through. So it's like pulling teeth sometimes to ask all these questions, but you need to know really important things like how much logic is on this form. You need to ask them what all the field types are. Definitely find out if you'll be able to see if it has any subtables, like repeating tables on it, and find out not only about the fields and the logic with the fields, but the approval process. And the approval process usually is way more complicated than the form itself. So on the piece of paper, you might just see the words approver 1, approver 2, approver 3 with signatures, and they might be walking around from different offices, like physically passing this piece of paper around. I've seen people still do that. But
we call them German government agencies, but
yes. Here's your binder. Find the page.
Yeah,
and sign
exactly.
it. So the approval process, I love building approval processes in Power Apps because I like to create a nice, simple interface for end users. So when I'm filling out a form, I'm in that app. When I'm approver, I get sent a link to an email, a link in my email directly to that same app, and I have a nice, simple approve button. But all that logic is you have to build that into the Power App, and it's pretty complex. But you have to kind of weigh the ease of use for the end users and making it all make sense to them and not have a lot of different places they have to go. Here's the document, here's the approval, and kind of stuff floating around everywhere, versus just one interface everybody goes to. And so that gathering the requirements for the approval process is really going to be where it's at when you have to figure out how complex that form is going to have to be.
Okay. That's awesome. Also, one thing we want to think about is how big or scalable are we talking about? If it is under a certain amount for a year or something like that, if it's over 5,000, maybe we can think about go to Dataverse, going to model-driven apps or Power Apps from the front end as well. So some people say Power Apps is too powerful for simple forms. Like, what is your response to that?
I agree. It's pretty complex, but again, it depends. One thing you could do when you're talking about the requirements to the business, when the business is telling you their requirements, one thing you could do is say, all right, well, we can get you 80% of these requirements if we just use a SharePoint form. Are you okay with that? or we can get you 100% of your requirements if we spend 50 hours and you do this custom Power Apps form. And if you have, 1,000 transactions a month or something like that, and your list is going to grow very large, then this is how much Dataverse is going to cost. This is how much those premium licenses are going to cost. Mm-hmm. And so when they hear about the cost, sometimes that's prohibitive. And a lot of small companies just use SharePoint for everything like that anyway, because of their small businesses, and they can't afford that necessarily. So.
Yeah, it's ever been a licensing game, I think. so it's regarding to me and Forto. So Forto works more in the Dynamics path, and I would say I'm the Canvas app guy, and it's ever been the same. So if a customer said, "Oh, now we have SharePoint, so we need to bring it on the SharePoint." So, but I think it's 200,000 data sets. No, SharePoint. So yeah,
right.
I think this is. And this is the main topic. I think the customer should not do crazy decisions. This must be based on their, I would say, specification sheet or on their demands, and it's need to talk with the right consultant where to find an solution regarding to the demand. And it's not ever been so, I think. So we coming in a lot of decision where the customer didn't take the right decision. How do you see this in the past on your side? I think this is an important part.
Have I seen that happen? Is that what you're asking? Sorry, what was the question?
Yeah, is it? Do you have get this, I would say with the same. I would say, do you have the same problems with your customers? Is a big discussion point, the licensing part. If I come from my Canvas side and I need to go to, they say we need, for example, on the Canvas app, Dataverse. It's the same regarding the licensing. Do you have very often the discussion with your customers too?
Yes, I mean, as soon as you discuss the data source with them and tell them a Dataverse and try and calculate out what that licensing is going to cost, usually they immediately know if their company can afford that or not. So, I mean, you are kind of taking a risk trying to put thousands and thousands of items in a SharePoint list, but those smaller companies, that's just what they have to do sometimes. So, I think, does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think.
Yeah. Okay.
Good.
Is there anything you want to add, Laura, regarding to Power Apps forms before we move on to a feature comparison?
Well, there are actually some Teams forms. Have you seen those? They're Microsoft forms behind the scenes. Have you seen the Teams forms? That's kind of another thing I was going to mention to you all. So in Teams, there is an app that you can add in the left panel called the Approvals app. And it has custom forms. Oh.
I think there are new forms where the SharePoint ones, where you can have one data source, but multiple versions of the form, and then you can copy the link to send it to other people. What I have found with my clients, they're having issues like, well, you shared it to me. Now I can't find the link anymore. Can you do something about it so I can see all the links that was shared to me with all these forms? Now I'm just here like, I don't know, like there is not really a solution to find all the links that were shared to you across all these SharePoint lists. Has anybody asked about the similar things from your experience?
As far as the link, this form the modern form is kind of mentioned it a little bit a few minutes ago with the other modern form on a SharePoint list, and just kind of a recap. It's one way, just like a Microsoft form, but yes, it goes straight to the list. They don't have to have access to the list, and you can create a shareable link, but it is a fairly new function, kind of a new product, new feature, and I don't think Microsoft has created a way to see all the links that have been shared with you. What I would do as a best practice for those is when you create the link to that form, and that link is the only way end users are going to get to that form, really, because once you've created the form, when they go to that list and open an item, it's not going to be that modern form. So once you create the link to the form, I would take the form and go to create like a quick links web part on your SharePoint page and put the link in there. And that's going to be a good best practice way to keep track of just where the link is. And then you wouldn't have to know all the individuals you shared it with. You could put it on a page and give, on a page that they have access to, and then you would just have one place people are clicking to get to the form.
Okay. Yeah, that's an interesting idea. I was also thinking you can create a SharePoint list of all these lists of links that you share to specific users. So that's a good way.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, we'll have to think about it. So let's move on to getting a comparison. Laura, can you give us a breakdown on features like conditional logic? Hopefully soon.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I actually have a table that I created. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you.
Oh, okay.
Yes,
I have a comparison table.
I think there's just some delay with StreamYard.
Oh, okay. Microsoft Forms are one way. The modern SharePoint list forms are one way. Both of those have branching logic for just some basic logic of jumping to specific places in the form. So the one way could be a pro or a con, depending on your requirements. And then you have SharePoint, just a straight up SharePoint list, and the out of the box form is very easy and it's just already there. But to customize it beyond just rearranging fields and creating sections, you can't really do that. And so a lot of those things having to do with logic and building like an enterprise level business process, that's going to require going to Power Apps. So that's kind of a synopsis of the feature comparison, but I do have a comparison table I can share with you.
Okay, go ahead and share that.
Okay, let's see.
And can I steal that table? That would be fantastic.
Oh yeah, I can send it to you. Let me see. I've got, I should just jump straight to that slide. Hold on a second. That one's at the end, and here we go. So that is, let me make sure. Okay, can you see that?
Give it 5 to 10 seconds. Okay. This is, it's loading. Please wait.
It is, okay.
Otherwise, you can give it a retry. Like
I'll give it a retry.
All okay. Microsoft computers, we give it a retry every 10 minutes.
There we go. Okay, I think you can see it now.
Yes.
Okay, so this is just kind of a synopsis. A lot of the things that we've been talking about. You have Microsoft Forms, again, one way, surveys, quizzes, and polls. They're very, very simple to design. I'm kind of going down the Microsoft Forms column. Permissions, they can be external or anonymous, but with that functionality, you do lose the ability to have attachments. The user interface and customization is very limited. It's you're just going, fields are just going straight down the page, but it does have branching logic, which means you can say, according to this value, jump to this other question. Simple online mobile accessibility. And then again, just for one-way simple forms. And you could have an E1 license and higher, like most every Microsoft 365 license has that. Very low learning curve. The modern list forms, that second SharePoint list form we were talking about, is also one-way simple. It's not externally available, not anonymous. So it's internal users only, but internal users don't have to have permission to the list where the form lives. The user interface, again, very simple, just fields straight down the form. Just a lot of similarities to Microsoft Forms. If you want the items to be in a SharePoint list, though, if it's a Microsoft form, you have to go out of your way to create a Power Automate flow to put the items in a SharePoint list. With the modern list forms, you already have your list. And again, E1 and higher. And then Microsoft Lists, just the out-of-the-box form, that first one we talked about, is intermediate level, because in order to customize those forms, you have to kind of write JSON code, and you have a little syntax that you have to use to create if you want to create sections. So they can kind of be arranged in columns and sections. And then just any SharePoint list limitations exist. You can have attachments, though, of course. You do have a SharePoint mobile app. It's online only. And you have all of your columns, your filtering and sorting that the end user can do just directly in the list. You can set up, you have alerts are going away, but you have quick steps that are fairly new that you can create directly in your list to do logic and you to do like little quick actions. And you have a rules engine, which is kind of replacing alerts and where you can create rules to do logic based on a field change or based on, you could send an email or set a field value based on certain conditions automatically, kind of like without having to create a workflow. And so it's kind of a medium learning curve. And then of course, Power Apps, it's a completely blank canvas. You can do absolutely anything you want to. It is just a very, very advanced, a very steep learning curve. Again, that can only be authenticated users. You can be an external user and use a Power App, but the external user still has to have a license for it. It can't just be a completely anonymous user. So if I have an external user who works at another company that has Microsoft, they have a Microsoft 365 account, and they're external user coming to my tenant filling out a Power App form, they have to have a license that includes Power Apps on whatever tenant they're on. And if they don't have one, you can go into your list of external users in your intra user admin and assign them one of your licenses if you need them to be able to use that. So that's a nice functionality. You have a Power Apps mobile app. You have offline capabilities. If you are using Dataverse as your data source, you just have a checkbox in your settings to say, make it offline. If you're using SharePoint as your data source, you do have the ability to make the app offline, have offline capabilities, but is a ton of extra work. So like whatever time it takes to build the app, you might want to double that if you're adding in the offline part. And then it can range from simple to complex, and you can have hundreds of different connectors, different backend databases. You can have SQL, Dataverse, SharePoint. You have all the different Microsoft 365 products. Pretty much all have connectors. Like you could use a planner connector, and you can have your Power App assign planner tasks to people. It's just almost endless what you can do. And then for actual pro developers, I am not a developer, but for developers, they have actually put a lot more functionality in it lately in Power Apps just in the last year or two, for them to use GitHub and to have more control over the code and be able to put code in Power Apps. So I'm not as familiar with that since I'm not a developer, but yeah, it is much more complicated to learn, but a ton of functionality.
But what are the most misunderstood features or myths around these tools?
Most misunderstood?
Yeah.
Is that what you said? Most misunderstood features. I think that as far as usually misunderstood features, I think about end users and business users who are not necessarily technical, like IT people. When they start creating forms, I think one of the most misunderstood concepts is like a repeating table, is the fact that like as soon as you have to have multiple rows within your record that you're creating, you really do need to have a separate list and have a parent-child relationship. So that's going to be like a complexity level that basic non-IT people aren't necessarily going to understand at first.
Yeah, and I think there is a part like, I think in Power Apps where I named it maker or citizen developer, and I think Power Apps goes more to I would say, citizen developer part, and forms and lists are, I would say, Microsoft lists and so on are more, I would say, end user related. What do you think about this?
I do. I feel like maybe there's something kind of in between, because when you're customizing a SharePoint list and you're customizing that out of the box form and writing JSON, that's not really end user. It's not a pro dev, but also you can customize the way the list looks with JSON by customizing the columns and doing conditional formatting and putting buttons on the columns. So that again, but that's not really end user. So yeah, I would consider some of that stuff citizen developer.
Great. Do we want to move to the next one? because
Sure,
the
give it
next
a
one is
software.
the one I like most, because I'd like to play a game, which sounds amazingly like Saw, but I'm not Jigsaw. So let's make it calm. Everything is fine. I would like to hear some takes, Laura, on different scenarios, and you can basically say what the heck, or just share your ideas. So let's start with the very first one. A school wants to collect feedback from parents. What would you go with?
Microsoft Forms.
Straight, directly. Okay,
Yes.
good. That was quick. Okay.
Why?
Why exactly?
Yeah,
Why?
right.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. My children's schools do this, and one of my children's schools, they use Google products, so they use Google Forms, and so many times they send out those Google Forms and they forget to make it anonymous. Like half the time you get a form from the teacher saying to fill out, it asks you for your credentials, and it's like, I guess it's not a default feature anyway. Why? Because it's anonymous, and your teacher, your students, your parents are not going to have credentials in your tenant. So Microsoft Forms are the only ones out of those that are anonymous.
Okay, great. Then let's move to another scenario. A legal department needs secure document submission.
Secure document submission. Well,
You
several
know,
different ways.
there are governments outside that use signal groups to communicate important decisions, but we are not talking about those ones.
Yeah. Well, if you're just talking about a document, yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Not necessarily have a form, but if you're just talking about a document submission, Teams channels, each Teams channel can have an email address. So you can right click on any Teams channel and just say, give me the email address. And so you can have people email directly to those documents, directly to Teams, without having to have credentials or anything. It's just going in an email. Another thing you can do is, if your tenant has settings, sharing settings that allow you to share externally, then you're going to have the ability to request files. I have a show I do called Power Hour on Wednesdays. I did a Power Hour about this, where in OneDrive and SharePoint, you can have a folder and you can right click it and choose request files. And that gives you a special link that you can give to external people. And that way it's just going to let them drop files into that folder, but they're not really going into SharePoint to do it. Okay. Those are just a couple of examples.
Without any credentials, or with credentials?
Well,
okay.
Without.
Okay, that's interesting.
Oh, the next one is one of my favorites. I will tell you soon why, but let me start. A field sales team wants to submit customer orders on mobile.
I would say a Power Apps Canvas app on Dataverse, because Dataverse has the offline capabilities for a mobile app. And I mean, you didn't say that it had to be offline, but I definitely think a Power App would be a nice, robust way to do that, a Canvas app, because there's a Power Apps app that you can install on your mobile device.
Which is fine. In the past, I had the scenario for a customer, and they basically used Resco Mobile in conjunction with Dynamics 365, and it worked. It worked also very, very well, because as you mentioned, you always regularly are in a situation where you are offline, not necessarily online when you are on mobile connected. For example, if you are in my location here, you may be more often be offline than online, and synchronization is very it's key here and king, basically. So there are plenty of solutions, but I would go the same route. Nice.
For the one question, what do you think about Power Pages here?
Power Pages is really kind of part of model-driven, like Dynamics and that whole school of set of products. Power Pages is like kind of exactly what I was talking about with model-driven apps, where it's kind of limited. You don't have that much customization. You really just have fields down a form, and it's going to put that data in Dataverse. So usually that involves Dataverse licensing when you're dealing with. Now, there is a way to create a virtual table in Dataverse and to a SharePoint list and have the data go into a SharePoint list, but you're still involving Dataverse, which involves that kind of licensing.
And also Power Pages is good for a scenario where you need bi-directional communication in any ways, and you don't need to do much customization, because you can customize actually, but then you are in a situation where you need really front-end developers, because then you are moving around the standards, which is possible, but it takes more time, really more time. So it's not necessarily a very narrow scenario where I would consider. And I like Power Pages, but honestly, it's a hammer, and you don't use a hammer for cleaning up a window, for example, right? There is the correct tool for everything. Speaking about hammers, next scenario, HR wants onboarding forms with approvals and file uploads.
I would use a Power Apps Canvas app, which may or may not, you could just use SharePoint as a backend depending on the amount of data that you have. But that sounds like something that I would use as a Power App. It depends on how complex the approvals are. So if you have something really, really simple, maybe one approval, you could probably get away with just using a regular old SharePoint list form, but because you do have attachments with SharePoint list forms. So with that one, it kind of depends on any specific requirements or a subtable or something like that. So maybe it's very simple. It could be just a SharePoint, out-of-the-box SharePoint list form, but probably a Canvas app.
Great. My scenarios are over. I don't have more. So I'm happy. Thank you.
Sounds good. Well, Laura, you have helped so many clients to choose the right tools. I know you already showed us a table, which tools to go with. Is that the simple decision-making framework that you have?
Yes. Well, a lot of it. So this doesn't really address the requirements gathering part that I was talking about earlier. So it is a pretty long, detailed discussion that you would need to have to kind of translate some of these concepts to business people when you're asking about logic and approvals and required fields and things like that, because some of those, sometimes you have to explain what that means. But yes, that is a good sort of framework. And then I have a little free online class on my site at iwmentor.com called Building Business Processes, and where I go through, it's about an hour long or so, where I go through like that conversation of just, it's completely agnostic to what products you'd be using. It is just the requirements gathering conversation.
Okay. So do you have a framework for that as well, of like what questions to ask? Do you have a sheet that does that?
I don't have a sheet necessarily. No, I don't have that. I just have it in that course, and it's just kind of stuff that I was talking about a few minutes ago with field types and required fields and things like that.
Okay, well, sounds good. Well, is there anything else you want to add before we move on to Q&A from the audience?
No, I can't think of anything.
Okay.
So
we are coming to our
we're coming to our most important area, the Q&A session. So, but Mirko said we have no questions. This is crazy. So I think so that
we have
more than 20 questions.
We have some remarks. We have some remarks, right?
Yeah.
Which I find interesting here. Shannon wrote. By the way, sorry if I butchered your name. It's not on purpose. It's a shame that Microsoft stopped the real-time sync between MS Forms and Excel. Yeah, I think nothing more to add here, basically. Just a remark. Okay, do we have any other remarks here that we are seeing here? Many times clients want to add requirements to forms you've built if between Microsoft Lists and Canvas app. I feel like Power Apps is safer because it allows for more flexibility in requirements.
That is a true statement. Yes.
I have to agree. Wonderful.
Requirements always change. Oh, right. Yes, they're retiring the Microsoft Lists mobile app. And I don't see people use the SharePoint mobile app that often either. But I guess nobody was using it. I'm not sure why.
I think that was it for now. I mean, we can extend it. Perhaps someone here in the audience has additional questions. I know for a fact that Marcel has a lot of questions, basically. Marcel is the guy that provides questions. Whenever I'm lonely and I have nothing to say, I ask, Marcel, do you have any questions? And Marcel has many questions. So I'm sounding like the president at the moment of many questions.
But for today, we're running out of time. I think it was a really, really great show. So it was a really good overview.
Yes.
What we get from you. And so regarding to our we're coming to the end of our show. So last famous word I would say regarding to this topic for today, what do you give us as an, I would say, as an hint for our I would say guests for today regarding to our topic?
Ask a lot of questions. Don't just go straight into building it a certain way. Be sure that you understand, not just assume that you know all the requirements just because they handed you a piece of paper. Like, have a conversation about it, because that's, I mean, again, a lot of the time businesses do that. They'll just say, here's the PDF, make it electronic, and go. And so where is that going to be? Where are we building it? Where do you want the users to go? Where do you want them to click? Do you want them to go to a SharePoint page and click a link to open an app? Or do you want them to be able to see the things they've submitted already once they start, after they filled out the form? Do you like, what is that whole experience, not only filling out the form, but the user experience and the approver's experience going through the business process around that thing?
Awesome. Nothing to add here. Which is right.
I did see a few comments. They said, Christopher said, do you have a copy of the table that you shared that the audience can download and share?
How could I get that to you?
It's
a slide, but
we do it with the magical elf, our Dobby in the channel, which is called Mirko in the background.
Mirko will figure it out.
Yeah.
Mirko figures out everything.
I did a power hour one time where I shared it, but I don't remember where I put it.
Well, sounds good. With that, it's a wrap for another session of the M365 Show. Thank you, Laura, and thank you to our viewers as well. So don't forget to connect with Laura via LinkedIn / I think SharePoint Guru. Is that still correct? Awesome.
That's the URL. Yeah.
Perfect.
Awesome.
And watch your website iwmentor.com. Yeah.
Yes. Can I share my screen real quick?
Yeah.
Or is it too late?
Oh.
I've got all my contact information on a slide, so I'll just do that. There it is. Okay, so yes, my company is IW Mentor, iwmentor.com. It is online training and self-paced training for SharePoint, Power Apps, Power Automate, Forms, Planner, OneDrive, Copilot, all these things. And I have a blog, and here's all my Twitter handle, YouTube, and TikTok.
Wait, actually, it's called Wonder, Laura. Really? I thought Marcel made a joke.
No,
Awesome.
That was not a joke. So I'm 10 since you post info path stories.
Okay.
Yeah, that's why I said Wonder Laura.
Yep, wonderlaura.com.
Guess we will have soon a new hero on the Marvel shows, right? Which is fine. That's okay. Wonder Laura.
I was just wondering, what does IW stand for?
Information worker.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's not for admins, not for devs. It's for information workers.
You mean for the real workers? Oh, sorry, admins. I'm getting kicked by someone else. Oh, it's okay. It's okay.
Really, really, really good. So thank you, Laura. And our next show is on 23rd of October with Mary Myers with the topic Things Before You Flow. And on 6th of November is Shane Young, our guest. This would be a really great show, I think.
My old boss.
Stay tuned. Have a nice day. Yeah. And we see us again. Bye-bye.
See you soon.
Thanks.
Sounds good. Thank
Bye.
you. Take care.
Bring the song. Bring the song.
Hi, I'm Sean, and I train people to become Power Platform Solutions Architects. If you're watching this, you know Power Platform, but be honest. When you're building a solution, are you using the best tools to solve the problem or just the tools you know? If you love building powerful, scalable solutions that make your company money, let me share why our training is different. We've noticed that the best architects know a series of best practices and they apply them to every project. So we took all these best practices and put them into this course.